Okay, so we're dealing with this site that I have, and it's 150 feet square. It's a perfectly square site, and so we'll deal with that. And like I said, it has a street on the south side and an avenue on the west side, and there's no intersection. It just curves around the southwest corner of the property. It just curves around there. The right-of-way for that street on the south and west is 70 feet. So from the property line on one side of the street to the property line on the other side of the street is 70 feet on both the south and the west. The street that runs inside of that property line, inside of that right-of-way, is 32 feet wide, and it's centered in that right-of-way. So here I have an example of how that site could lay out. And when you go click on your site plan, it's going to come up without all this stuff on there, of course, but it's going to come up with your building, and you're going to probably see your standing seam roof. You're going to see your grid lines, and you're not going to have a property line or anything like that. You're just going to see the building looking down on it from the roof, and you're going to see the grid lines, and that's all you're going to probably see at that point. So we need to turn some of those things off, right? So I'm going to click on my grid lines and hide in the view that category to get rid of them. I'm going to click on this roof panel, and I'm going to hide in view that category. I'm getting down into my building. I've got, in my case, I've put in a ceiling, so I need to click on these light fixtures and hide that category. I have this floor slab that's showing up. I'm going to hide that category. So I want to get it down so I'm just basically looking at the walls and doors and windows and things probably. Okay, so in your case, you might get to this point and you might not see doors and windows. They might not show up. So if we go look at the view range under the properties, the view range, it'll probably default to this. The top is associated with level 1, and the offset is 200 feet above it. So it's looking down from 200 feet above the building. The cut plane is at 200 feet, so again it's looking down through the building, and the bottom level is the footing. All I have to do in order to get all my doors and windows to show would be to change the cut plane to maybe 5 feet. And then all of a sudden now I can see my doors and windows, right? The cut plane is slicing through the building at a level that's going to now show stuff. So we can apply that. So that's how you're going to get your doors and things to show up.
You want doors and windows to show up on
Yeah.
the site plan?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
On this one here, the reason for that is I want to be able to see where my sidewalk should be, where my overhead doors are, so that I can lay out my driveways and things like that. Okay?
Will we want to leave them there?
Yes.
Okay.
Just like that. So that'll be what your floor plan looks like when on the site plan.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and in this example, I'm just going to highlight, shade this a little bit so you can actually see what I've done. You know, I put the parking, the street, I put some vehicles on there and things like that. Vehicles and things like that are not something you would typically have on the site plan, but you'd have it on your presentation or your cover sheet where you're going to get a perspective view of your building. So again, if it was the true site plan, you wouldn't have those on there, but we'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so let's start with this. I'm going to pause here. Okay, so now I've just opened up another drawing that's just a basic shell of a building, and it has those grid lines on it. And if I go to my site plan, this is what will show up on your site plan probably, except you might see your roof and things like that. So again, I'm going to hide these in the view. And I've just got my basic building there. So I'm going to put a property line on this building. So you go to massing and site at the top, go over here to property line, click on that. And we're going to go to the property line. We're going to create it. We have two different ways of creating it. We can create it by entering distance and bearing. Do you know what that would be? Okay, that's where you would enter in that this property line is 150 feet long on a distance, on a bearing of north 90 degrees, south or west 30 degrees or whatever, so you get the angles right. In our case, we're not going to do that. We're going to just go by sketch at this point. And then I'm just going to draw that rectangle, and I'm just going to come out here someplace. And it's going to be 150 feet square, right? And okay, and then I'll finish that. Okay, so we created a property line around the building, and now we need to move that in relationship to our building. And that's going to be up to you. For my piece of property, I would like some parking on the front side or the south side, whatever's front on whatever design you have, south or west probably, or south. Could be any of them, I guess. But on the two sides that are on the street, then I want parking. On the side that has that is the street, and the side that has the avenue, I want some parking on those two sides. The other end of the building can be the end that probably let's see. It all depends on where you have your overhead doors, but if there's a side that doesn't have any doors, you could be up to within 10 feet of the property line. Okay, so on the particular building that I have here, I'm going to say that on this side over here, I don't have any doors or windows here, so I'm going to place my building 10 feet from that property line. That would be the minimum. So I could easier to do it this way probably. Okay, I can move it by clicking on the property line and changing that to 10 feet. Okay. On the side, this side here, I'm going to have some parking. So I don't want my parking right up against the property line. I want it to be 5 feet away from the property line. A parking stall is 20 feet long, and I want a 24-foot driveway. So 20, 24, that's 44 plus, let's say, 6 feet off the property line. That would be 50. And then I want a sidewalk up against my building. So let's say 55 feet at a minimum. Okay. So I'm just throwing out examples here. You can make it work for your property. So now I've got my building approximately where I want it. As I start laying out my my site improvements, which are parking lots, driveways, sidewalks, things like that, I may have to make some adjustments, but that's going to be, so we'll have a, in my case here, I'll probably have a driveway coming into my overhead door. I can park over here, I can park over here, and I can have a driveway going out over there. Okay, so at this point, we need to create some other lines that represent where that right-of-way is and where the street is going to go. So I'm just going to go to annotate and throw some lines on here. So we'll go to detail lines. I'm going to use hidden lines for now. And I'm going to throw in a line over here and over here. Now that would be the right-of-way line. This is the property. This would be the property across the street, right? So again, if I throw in a dimension here, that line was supposed to be 70 feet, right? Okay, so now that's where the right-of-way is. Now I'm going to put in the center line of the street, so I could just offset this line half of 70 or 35 feet. Okay, and then my street was going to be 32 feet wide, so again I can offset 16 feet. Probably just do this. Okay, so now I know where my street's going to be in relationship to my property. I'm going to put a radius on this street, and the radius point is the intersection of that corner. So I'm going to go to in this case, I'm just going to use a circle. That's probably fastest. And I'm going to split that circle. Okay, and then I can offset that circle. Okay, and now I know where my street's going to be and where the center line of the street is and so forth. Okay, so I'm laying out some things with just lines, and then when I go to put my topography on there, I have things to snap to. Okay, so this is pretty much a starting point for my project. The next thing I'd want to do would be to put my topography on here. And we're going to make the assumption that this piece of property is in Wahpeton, North Dakota, so it's basically flat, right? There's not much terrain change here. So I want my building to be 2 feet higher, the floor of the building 2 feet higher than the property line all around. That way I can get drainage away from my building. And then the street will be another foot lower than that. So from the property line to the curb is going to drop another foot. Okay, so I'm going to put some topography on here. So I'll go back to massing and site, topography, and first off I'm going to go around the building, and I don't want to be at 0 because that's right at floor line. I want to drop my grade at the building to 4 inches below the top of the foundation. So my starting point is going to be 4 inches below the floor line. I'm just going to click on the corners of the building. Okay, so that's my grade at the building. And then I'm going to lower it another 6 inches. So let's go 10 inches lower. Let's make it an even foot. Let's go minus 12 inches. And I'm just going to go out a ways. We can adjust these later if we need to. And then I'm going to go 1'6". Go a little farther. And then I'll go to my 2 foot at the property line. Okay, so that's my property. Now I want to go out another foot lower, so I'm going to make that 3. And I'm going to pick these points. I'll pick another point up here someplace. When I get to this curb, I'm going to click several little points along that curve. Okay, now I want to drop that curb 6 more inches. So right outside of that, I should have put another line in there to represent the thickness, the width of the curb, but I didn't, so I'm just going to in fact, that's what you should do, is just offset that line probably 6-8 inches so that you can get a little more accuracy than I've got here, just to give you something to snap to. Okay, and then the middle of the street is going to be back up because the street's going to have a crown to it, so I'm going to go back to 3 foot. And then I'm going to go back to minus 3'6" again to the other side. Back up to 3 foot. And the closer you put these points on the curve, the more curved it'll be. So, okay, and then on the property line across, I'll be back up to 2 feet. Okay, and then I can finish that. Okay, so it's going to look a little screwy here right now, but I can make some adjustments later. If we go look at this isometrically, let's see what we got. And if we look at it shaded, we can't tell much because it's so flat, but you can see that there is terrain change there. Okay. We don't want this terrain to be dirt, so we want to change the material of it. Material. I have to go back to looking at it from the site plan. I have to click on that topography. And edit the surface. And the material just defaulted to by category, so I want to change that to grass. And when I look through here, I may not find grass. Let's close that for now. Right, I don't see any grass in there, so I'm going to go search and type in grass. And grass is down here. If I double click on that, it'll put it in here. And I can, that's what the rendering will look like there. But I want to see it in color, so I'll change it to a green. Lighten it up a little bit. Yeah, now it's all grass, right? Then we're going to go back to the site plan again, and now I need to put in order to create sidewalks and streets and stuff. How do I do that? Okay, so we'll go to subregion, and in this case I'm just going to put in the street. So I'll go to subregion, I'll just go to lines, I'm going to start up here, and I need to curve around this street, around this corner. I could use an arc, I guess, and get this 100% accurate. This is probably fast enough, though. And I'm doing this fairly fast, so it does probably, I might miss a few points, but. You need to make sure that's a closed loop there, so I'd have to finish that off. Now the material for my street, I'm going to set that up right away, and it's going to be concrete. And I want the street to look darker than the driveways and things like that. So I'm going to use concrete lightweight for my street, and you'll use cast in place gray concrete for your driveways and things. Okay, then you'll get two different shades of gray. So I'll just pick that. Okay, it's going to tell me that there's no surface pattern on a fill region or in a sub-region, so I don't care. That's fine. And then I'll finish that. And now if I look at my building as an isometric, I have that street in there. Okay, so the same process works for your driveways and parking and so forth. So when you go back to your site plan, don't just randomly go in here and try to do a sub-region for a parking lot that you're just going to randomly pick points. You're going to want to first off go to annotate and put some line work in there so you can follow to create the parking, right? So you want to really use that. In this case, I would click on my site and hide it in the view. So I'm back to this, and now I can actually go in here and figure out where I want my sidewalks, where I want my curves and things like that, and create my parking and driveways and sidewalks. Okay, so that's going to end this setup process, and go ahead and start developing your site plan.